Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So we have spoken of the analysis is Drik and Drishya, having this clarity, what is the seer, what is always behind every experience. Not that it's spatially behind, it's just that which is in the presence of it, every experience is identified for what it is. So it itself, the Drik, is not an experience. In fact, there's a notion, right, that it's supposed to be something that is seen. It's something that's kind of, when I come in touch with this Drik, then it's going to kind of take place as some form of bliss or everything's going to be fixed and I'm not going to have any anxiety anymore. Things will be magically solved. However, the reality is not like this because you still have a body and you still have a mind. And the job of the body is to experience sensations. And the body is not your creation. If there's hot weather, your body will experience discomfort or comfort. If there's cold weather, similarly with the mind, if the mind is going through some kind of anxiety, some financial concerns, or someone kind of hurts you or says something wrong, to kind of say, well, I'm awareness and I don't need this, just this is kind of cuckoo, right? So you see, this tradition does not discard experiences. It addresses it because I am dealing with a human being and, I want to resolve the situation while it's being presented before me. And similarly, I want to, also be treated well by the other person. So if that's not possible, then you can, kind of move on. However, so it's not kind of like taking this knowledge and living with this philosophy that everything is just, seen, right? And I'm the seer. It has a real kind of humble, down to earth, right, relation. You're still in the world, but in the background, as I said to Diderik in the morning, there's a shock absorber. There's a shock absorber that there is a distinction here. There is a seen event, there is a seen experience, there's a seen discomfort, there's a seen comfort, but it doesn't define me. It doesn't define the seer in whose presence, right, these experiences for everyone are taking place, okay? And therefore, this seer, being unborn, it has no one can add onto it because whoever is born, right, is just born in the presence of the seer, the one seer. So whatever conditions you have, right, your body has, it doesn't in any way pass on to consciousness. Otherwise, if consciousness is one and the same, then everyone will suddenly kind of start entertaining your anxiety because you've contaminated consciousness, right? And so the question now comes is, if there is this Drik and Drishya, because this is an Advaita course, this is understanding that all that is here is one without a second. So that naturally begs the question, so then how do I explain this Drishya and Drik? There's two things here. And the way to do this is you have to apply an analysis, which is called Satya Mithya Viveka. So what it says is that this Drik, that consciousness, awareness, is Satyam, and the seen is Mithya. So Satyam, these are very common words, and it's the crux of Vedanta, to understand this world, how to resolve all of these differences. Satyam just means that which stands independently of itself. It doesn't need anything to support it. It doesn't need kind of, something else to give it its existence. It is self-existing, self-shining, and it didn't kind of, no one built it. It is the final thing, which was always there from the beginning. And from it arises this entire universe. Now, Mithya means that which needs something else for its existence. So you take, for example, let's say, and by the way, Mithya does not mean illusion. Okay, we often have this word illusion. I never use the word illusion. In fact, I was with you, Julie, to the festival, and there was this kirtanam. What was the festival name? What was the?
I forgot to.
Okay, so it was an Indian festival, and on the front there were kirtanam, and this fella's like, Maya is just an illusion, and it's like, oh no, right? And there were many people there, right? So this is the common talk that you have outside the class, the illusion thing. If it's an illusion, then then why are you telling me it's an illusion? You're also an illusion, right? Too. So I don't need to hear from an illusion that everything else is an illusion, because then you're an illusion, right? So mithya is not an illusion. It just means it depends on something else for its existence. So take, for example, okay, perfect. So we have a table here, and suppose I asked you the question, is this a table or is this wood? Right? Simple question. Is this a table or is this wood?
Table made of wood.
Yeah, very smart. Okay, now you included the whole teaching, right? So now, but look at this. Suppose I go to the store and, okay, I'll ask you this question. What is more real? Is the table more real or is the wood more real? Wood. Okay, so you guys know too much here. So suppose you go to a store and you say, can I buy some wood? And they give you back a table, right? Or you say, can I buy a table? And they give you back wood. Does this happen? No. But even though, because see, the substance of this is the wood, okay? So this table has no existence apart from its substance. It entirely has its being in its substance. So now, where exactly is this table? Is it besides the wood? Is it underneath the wood? Is it above the wood? Is it underneath the wood? Where is this table in relation to the wood? Huh?
In your mind.
No, I mean, looking just the simple, I know that is it. But so, right? So where is the wood here? You have to, negative question, where is the wood not? Right? Tell me. So can I find any place here throughout this table, which is just a name for the wood? Can I find any place here where the wood is not? No. So this table has no existence apart from the wood. Its entire beingness rests in the wood. Wherever there is table, that's exactly where the wood is. There is not one place where I cannot find the wood. So now suppose this table says, wood is the final reality. Let me go and meditate to find the wood. You see the thing? Let me go meditate to find the wood. The entire table that's saying that is already the wood right now. So the table in this case we call mithya. Why? Because it depends on its substance for its existence. Now, if this table breaks, does it break the wood in any way? No, the wood remains exactly wood. Now, what do I mean by break the table? I mean, what defines this table? What makes this a table? What makes this wood a table?
Shape and form.
Yeah, exactly. So the specific name for it. So if I take the legs off, then suddenly all of that reality that I was giving to the table and sort of table, fighting over the table. In America, what do they have? Black Friday? The stores open and right? And just kind of pulling left and right, the objects, and yet, so similarly here, suppose you're kind of pulling this table, my table, no, your table, my table, and then we have a fight over it. And then this entire thing is nothing but wood, right? It's just like, but then I look over there and I go, oh, it's just a tree, just a tree. So look at all of my value is on a mere name and form. and yet it has its existence not apart from something that I can find anywhere else. So in other words, my focus is where? On just the mere kind of the shape, the legs, and immediately, according to my value, I say, oh, because I value the table, I want the table. I don't want, the chair over there. So this means that this wood transcends the life of the table. Do you understand what that means? It transcends, not that it's sort of somewhere over there. It just means that whatever happens to the table, I can scratch the table, hammer the table can die, it can break, but the content, which it was always having its existence in, which never had its existence apart from, which has its existence in now, always that content remains exactly the same as it always has. So now you have, suppose, a furniture family made of wood, right? And so you have, a table, a father table. You have a chair, a sister, a chair, brother, and what shall we give to the wife? I don't know, or like a plate or something, right? And so, now they have a conversation with each other. And suppose now not a big, physically big, but suppose comes a table with pride, and it says, I'm a special table here. I am above you all. I'm above you all. Furniture is over there. And look at this. So this fella with so much pride in its existence, its entire being is in the same existence as everyone else. And yet it made up a little notion, a little story about why it is special. And yet even its story is nothing but the wood. It's made out of the wood. All of its words and its cognitions and all of its kind of thinking also has no existence apart from the wood. So all it's really doing is it's reconfiguring the wood in different combinations and permutations to make a story about how it itself is special. And yet it has no speciality at all. It's just a normal thing like anything else. It's what's called mithya. It's not an illusion, because look at this, if I call a table an illusion, what have I now discarded at the same time? The wood. I have discarded the entire reality if I call one thing an illusion. Suppose all of this is just made out of wood. The entire universe is made out of wood. And so I say, no, this is an illusion. Because this and over that is also the same content. If I discard this, automatically I've discarded everyone, including the person who just discarded it. So in other words, to call the world an illusion is to just reveal that one's understanding is not there, right? So this means that we first understand this enjoys a functional reality. A functional reality is something that is useful, something that helps you, something that serves you, something that brings you happiness. So look at this. Suppose now, you say, oh, I don't need to kind of have a relationship with another chair, right, or another table. So why would you say this if the understanding, suppose it's a wise table, and the wise table understands, I connect not on the mere name and form. Where do I connect? I connect on the content of both her, him, it, and myself. So the wise table connects on the content. The unwise table connects at the mere how things look like, how things how they're embellished and so on. This is why we don't kind of put any value to, someone's like, dressed up all special, and they're like, talking special, and they got nice words and, wisdom, people of few words. How is this defining the content from which everything is made? Because every personality, suppose this personality of the table, is it apart from the wood? The chair's personality, is it apart from the wood? The a fork made out of wood, is it apart from the wood? No. So no matter what personality it is, it has no existence apart from the one without which it has no existence. So now look at this. Suppose we stop at the table and we say, oh, okay, so stop at the wood. Oh, okay, so table is mithya and wood is satyam. But if you now inquire into the wood also depends on something else, doesn't it? So therefore now the wood gains mithya, and that which the wood depends on gains satyam. So now you ask, well, what is the wood made of? And you say, well, the wood is made of certain molecules like lignin and cellulose, right? So that's what makes up the wood. And you just take, for example, cellulose right now. That's a molecule. So molecule just means when you combine certain atoms, number of atoms, and you create a molecule. Now you look at, do I see the molecules here? No. Does it mean they're not here? No. Just because I don't see it, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. If you look at the analysis, this is not a belief. The fact that there are molecules here or atoms, it's not a belief. It's just it's a scientific observation. But now look at this. If I say now the molecules are satyam and the wood is mithya, then you can also break down the molecules into atoms, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms. Now that makes up lignin. But if I take, for example, carbon, just carbon, and I say, well, what's carbon made of? Well, it's made up of, like proton, electron, and neutron. So now carbon becomes, right, the periodic table of elements becomes mithya, and the proton, electron, neutron, right, becomes satyam. Right now, I see the table, but is there actually a table here? If you say yes, is there actually a table here? If you say yes, then what are you referring to? See, there is a table there, right? Like empirically speaking, there is a table, but is there actually a table here? No. Because why not? You say there is a table here, and someone says, no, this is wood. And someone says, no, this is table. And we have this argument. And I say, okay, so if you say there's actually a table here, because my question was, is there a table here? Okay, so suppose I take out the wood. Is there a table here? No. So if I ask you again, is there a table here? You say yes, but you understand cognitively only because the table depends on something else for its existence. So you're not discarding the name and form, but when you do mention the name and form, you understand there's a reality underneath it. So if I keep going like this, now you eventually come to atoms, and you can go further and further, right? Now you research this online, whatever it is, bosons, quarks, and so on. But then you come to eventually nothing but concepts, right? Mathematical formulas. In fact, the scientists will, in their quantum physics model, there's just so much mathematics, because all of their kind of observations is just broken down into mere concepts. So all of the forms ultimately resolve into nothing but a concept. But now you say, okay, so if everything in the universe that you can analyze, are we just analyzing the table, or you can now analyze something else with this too? You can analyze your thought. What's your thought made of? Experiences gained from the world, right? Now, made of objects, but those objects, if I analyze, have no reality, right? Without their kind of, constituents. So if anything in the universe resolves into a mere concept, then the question comes, then what is the relationship between a concept and, now what does a concept depend on?
Thinking.
Because concept is drishya. So concept always has its dependence on the seer of the drishya, the seer of the concept. So if the relationship between anything in the universe is ultimately between concept and drik, the awareness, then what does this mean? Nothing exists without awareness, right? Because where is there a form, where is there a concept unless it's in the presence of an awareful being? If everything resolves into a mere concept, and the relationship between concept and awareness is what? Satya mithya. The concept is mithya. Why is it mithya? Because it entirely has no beingness, it has no existence without a conscious being in whom it appears.
So can we say it's dependent upon the drink?
Yeah, you can say this is just semantics. Yeah, it's dependent on drik. It has no existence apart from drik. It's dependent upon drik. It has no existence apart from drik. So they're both okay. Just like this table has no existence without the wood. The wood has no existence without the atoms. So if you now look into this table, if I look deeper into it, can I find the table? No. If I look into the wood, can I find the wood? No. If I look into the molecules, can I find the molecules? No. If I look into the atoms, can I find the atoms? No. So what's the nature of reality then? If I can't really find anything, and yet it's there. It's there if I look at it, but if I analyze into it, it's not really there. But what is there at every level of analysis? What's there at the table of the wood, at the level of the wood? What's right now at the level of the wood? You, right? Drk. Now, when the table is no more, if I look into the table and I find the wood, what's at the level of the wood still? You. But table is gone. If I look into the wood, I no longer find the wood. But what's still at the level of the molecules? You. Satyam. If I get rid of molecules, no more molecules. Now we're at the level of the atoms. What's still at the level of the atoms? You. If I get rid of atoms, no more atoms. What's at the level of quarks? If I get rid of quarks and now we're at the concepts, what's still available? You, Drk. So at every level of analysis, I am. And then but what reduces? What is reducible? That which depends on I am. The table is reducible. The wood is reducible. The molecules are reducible. The atoms are reducible. But what's throughout the entire analysis? I am. Drk. And this Drk I am happens to be the content of the whole universe, as we will see soon, as we go into this inquiry deeper. So now the verse says, Swayam vibhati. So initially it says, awareness by itself shines and everything else other than it shines after. Do you now know what it means when it shines after? Right? Not that it's different from it. It just depends on your Drk for its existence. Okay? The table depends on Drk. The wood depends on Drk. The atom depends on Drk. The quarks depend on Drk. The constants depend on Drk. If you are not there, where's the table? If you are not there, where's the wood? Understand? See, when it comes to Satyam, is it a specific experience, Satyam? Satyam, that which the Drk. Is Drk a specific experience? No, because at the level of the table, what's as though superimposed on my awareness? The table. At the level of the wood, what's as though superimposed on my awareness? Wood. At the level of the atoms, what's as though superimposed on my awareness? So the experience always belongs to Mithya, and that in whose presence the experience is revealed for what it is belongs to Satyam, me, the self. This is why we say that Satyam or you are not an experience. Experience always belongs to Mithya. Now, if you do want to say, well, then how do I kind of get to know, myself as Satyam? Well, as I said yesterday, do you exist? Are you aware? Are you conscious? It's like such a normal, down-to-earth question that it's like, why are you even asking me this? Right? It's so normal. So the nature of this Drk is self-revealing I am. There's no need to philosophize about it. Because if I were to philosophize, yeah, but, that just becomes instantly another Mithya. And no matter how much you analyze your doubt, suppose you now clear up level 1 of your doubt. What's there? I am. Now suppose another doubt comes up, and you kind of get rid of that because you solved that. What's still there at the second level of doubt? I am. And then you go, oh, I've got one more doubt, right? And you resolve that too. What's still there? I am. So all throughout there is a Drk. But the Drishya leaves, changes. And is this Satya-Mithya relationship, is this something that is only true now? Is this only true today? 50,000 years ago, give me any object, and and you analyze that object. It depends on something else, depends on something else, depends on something else, depends on something else. Always depends on dirk, which happens to be the nature of the universe. Dirk is existence, the existence of a thing, the isness of a thing. Look at this. Table is. Table exists. Table gone. What exists now? Wood exists. Wood gone. What exists now? Atom exists. Atom gone. What exists now? Quark, right? Exists. Quark gone. What exists now? Concept is. Concept gone. What exists now? The same isness that was there throughout the entire level of analysis. So dirk is not only a conscious being, it's also existence of a thing. Table is, wood is. You see the isness? It stays all throughout. Is, exists, exists. But what also stays throughout the analysis? Dirk, 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 dirk. So two things remain throughout the entire analysis. Existence. Is there a table without existence of a table? Is there wood without existence of a wood? No. Is there atom without existence of an atom? No. So all the mithya depends on consciousness, the awareful being, and existence of it. It depends on existence. Now you say, well, geez, how do I know this existence in its pure form? Right? How do I, I understand I'm self-revealing I, but how do I know this is without being conditioned by a form? You see the question? Because here, table is. So the isness is conditioned by the table. Wood is. It's conditioned by the wood. Concept is. You see how it's always conditioned? So then you question now, well, how do I get to know this existence, this isness of a thing, without being conditioned at all? The answer is you can't. The only place, if there is a place, that you can know existence for what it is in your self-revealing I. You know that you are. That's the only unconditioned isness that you can find. Everything else is going to be conditioned by an experience, conditioned by a thought, conditioned by a mithya.
It says, Anyani Bhasayet Sadhanam Bina. It shines by itself and it illumines others without any aid. So when we talk about return by Chidabhas or reflective conscious, and this trick is illumining this body through the mind of Buddhi.
Yeah.
So it seems like these are the sadhanam, and it says sadhanam Bina.
Yeah, so sadhanam, so in this case, the word sadhanam doesn't require a secondary aid for consciousness to be. It doesn't, the isness, the existence doesn't require another satyam. It's the final satyam, where everything else, right, requires a sadhana, requires an aid, requires a foundation for its existence. Verse 6. Chit chaya aveshataha buddhao bhanam dhihi tu dvidha stitha eka ahankritihi anya syat antahkarana rupini. The mind appears to be conscious on the account of consciousness present in it. And then the mind is of two kinds. And then everything else is fine. So it's talking about what are you as a person made of. And in Vedanta, we have a model. So we're now analyzing the conscious being. And they have this model called the three bodies. And the first body is what we call the gross body, right? Stula. Now, stula is very simple. I feel it, right? It obtains in a kind of a space. It has weight. It has mass to it. A doctor puts injection inside it. It has pain. It has headache. It has migraine. It becomes hungry. It needs nutrients. So we're all very familiar with our gross stula sharira body. And then we have the sukshma sharira. This is, see, for example, I can see your stula, your brain, but I can't see your thoughts. I can't see like a green tree with an ocean and clouds. If I say, if I suppose, your scalp gets, cut and I can see your brain, and I say, imagine, like an ocean and trees, and you go, yep, I got it. But I just see electrical impulses, right, on my graph, and I can't really convert that into, I don't know what that means. But to you, you have a totally different reality. There's no brain in your imagination. There is no weight in your imagination. There is no, it's got nothing to do with this world, right? It's entirely a new construct of itself. So this is what we call the subtle in Vedanta, the subtle body, your thoughts. They're more, they don't have weight. So if I go to outer space, then my brain, wants to float up. But do your thoughts suddenly float up? It's like, let me imagine, gone. Let me remember what happened yesterday, gone, right? So it's a different order of reality, but it is still seen. It's still drishya. My brain is seen, but also my thoughts are seen too. Therefore, they both are mithya. Mithya. Okay, so whatever is seen is mithya. So here we have new terms. Mithya, and here we have satyam. Okay, and then we have causal body. So we have the physical body, we're all familiar. We have our thoughts, and then we have the causal body. Causal body is not really the unconscious. Unconscious mind belongs to a different model. When you do something in this world, when I say you, it's referring to your physical body and your subtle body. When that function, when that you does something in this world, then whatever actions you put into this world, there's a result that comes back. So the result never gets mixed up. So if you say something nice to someone, right, then they come back to you tomorrow and they say, wow, you're so kind to me. They don't go to someone else, right? So this means there is a certain return on your investment, right? So your investment was wise, your investment was one of goodness, and now you have received that back. So causal body, what is something that kind of stores, right, holds all of your what's called punyam. Punyam is whenever you do something that's noble or wise, okay, then you accrue a positive result onto your account, right? It comes back to you. So how does this manifest, this positive result? Suppose, you have lots of punyam. Now, what's punyam? Yeah, it's an unseen result of something wise that has been done in the past. Okay? It has not come yet, but it's coming. Okay? So how does this manifest? Well, it manifests as people showing you their care, their love, they accommodate you. Does everyone kind of, have the same response? Does everyone get treated equally? So you say, well, why am I being treated like with love and care and someone else is not? And we're both kind of respectable people, right? We're both, someone has, in the same position. It's like, why am I being treated differently than they are? This is because our punyam is different, yeah? I've done certain actions in the past that has accrued me a certain personality, and that personality shines. That's what your personality does. It shines in this world. And people pick this up. And they say, I really like this person, right? And I'm going to accommodate them and so on. But then we also make some boo-boos in our life. We have some errors, whether accidental or not. And they accrue what's called papa. They accrue those unpleasant or kind of afflictions that we have in our life. That's called papam. So this means when I put an action into the world and I cheat someone, I am unfair to them, I dismiss them, I discard them, and I get away with it, right? Seemingly I got away with. The law doesn't work like that. The law is going to get you, right? It's just how it is. It's how it's set up. So later on, whatever, right? In life, maybe it manifests as guilt or low self-esteem, or kind of I'm not a good person, So it shows, it shines in this world, and people pick this up. And so for that reason, they're kind of like, oh, I'm skeptical of this person. I don't want to really help them, right? So we see this happening in a society, It's like And so then out of compassion, you want to kind of help them out a little bit because you know they're suffering and no one else is coming to help them. And you say, let me, I understand what's going on here. Let me go and give them a little bit something. A causal body. Causal body, therefore, stores that this karmic account. We call this your account of wise and unwise, right, accumulated results in your account. That's the causal body. And in one term, you can call it your bank account. A bank account, what happens, suppose you want to go to the bank and you want to give notes that are clean notes, they're original notes. And you put this into your bank and they put this into your vault. And then later on, you go to this vault and what kind of notes are you going to get? Clean notes, right? And you pay people, they like you. Oh, these are beautiful notes. They have a nice fragrance to it. We like you because, I've never seen such beautiful notes in my life. I feel special that you're giving me these nice notes. No one ever has given me such beautiful notes. And so, you see, so you get a response based on what you have put before into the world. Similarly, I go and put kind of dirty notes into the bank. And then in the future, what kind of notes can I draw from my bank? Dirty notes. And now suppose I want to pay you with a dirty note. How is that going to make me feel? Because I know what's going on. I know I'm giving you a dirty note. I'm going to be very kind of, I hope they don't find me out. I hope they don't. See this? Low self-esteem. I hope they don't find me out. Come on. Yeah, I'm going to distract you. Yeah, come, give me. I'm going to try to, now I have to continue cheating and distracting you because I know that I'm starting out with a premise that is not fair. So therefore the person, already my interactions are funny now because I'm not being with the person, I'm being in my little agenda because I have to protect my self-interest for having, delivered dirty notes. So it's kind of like put dirty notes and I have to protect to not be found out. And that causes future conflict in this world. So causal body is like your bank account.
I just want to clarify causal body. Does it stay with you lifetime into lifetime into lifetime into the next bodies that you come across?
Yes, so obviously in this life you can't kind of, work out you can't receive all of your notes, right? Because the body doesn't live long enough. So these notes get stored in the causal body. The next question is, where is this causal body, right? I always get that. Where's the causal? There's no place. It's just there. It's just an account, right? And so, right, out of that, right, a new body, it gets sculpted according to what kind of body can I purchase with those dirty notes and clean notes? If I've got a lot of beautiful notes there, what kind of body and mind can I purchase? Very wise, religious, disciplined, interested, open mind. If I want to take the dirty, because that's all I have, I've got dirty notes, what kind of body can I buy? A body that is equivalent to the notes which I, in the past life, that person has put into the bank account. So the body that you have now is being purchased by whoever, right, was before you, whoever was depositing in your causal body before this life. I don't know who that person is. In Tattva Bodha, I called him Raj, So there was a Raj person, and I don't know who Raj is. I don't know if it was a male or a female. And that fella, I tell you, he did some fishy things, right? No doubt. But he did a lot of wise things. How do I know? Because the moment this fella was born, this fella started to inquire from age 9. He started to question things, reality, existence, started to ask questions non-stop. Like, what did parents tell me? Hey, inquire into nature of reality. No, all they said, no, make money. That's all they said. This is typical, in my country, Serbia, Croatia. Just make money. Be rich, make money. Okay, Dad, got it. But in me, there's this conflict. I always want to know what is deeper behind the nature of things. What's behind that? Now, did I purchase that in this life? Did I kind of get born and say, you know what? Okay, now I'm born. Hold on, don't speak to me, Mom and Dad. Let me just decide I'm going to be an inquirer. I'm going to think. I didn't do that. I don't know what inquiry meant. But this person came with that strong tendency to ask nonstop. thanks to Raj. He did the work, right? So this is what we call passing on. Now this karma, I will talk about the logistics of it in a following verse. Now the question was asked to me, what about memory? Okay, so out of these three bodies, specifically we're going to analyze the subtle body now. Okay, so the question is, what is the subtle body? Because I just said thoughts, but that's too general. So the subtle body is made up of 4 functions. The first one is your manas. Manas is something that it's a function that gives you emotions based on the environmental interactions. So, what happens is there's nothing wrong with emotions, right? They're just indicators. But what we do is we add our own stories onto what we feel. We say, well, I feel like this, and that's because, and then we fill in the blank according to our limited understanding of ourselves and the situation. So we make a false conclusion, and then we operate from the premise of that false conclusion with the world, right? So emotions are fine, but it becomes a burden when, the person starts to sort of, someone's crying, and I get a kick out of it. Oh, I feel good, because they're in a worse position than I am, therefore I am much better off than they are. See this? So I have an emotion, but what happens? Is it keeping with reality? No. Empathy is gone. What comes in? It becomes about the individual's well-being. I feel good because someone else is suffering. So this is, whose edition is this? Is this God's edition? No, this is my own edition. So therefore, there is some discernment. How much of this is being added, am I adding to, and how much of this is keeping with the facts? This is a question that is asked. Otherwise, we can kind of operate from a, unbeknownst to us, operate from a model that, and how do you know you're operating from your own model? How do you know? Easy. When you have an interaction with a person, there's harmony, right? This means I am keeping with the reality. There's harmony between us. If there's something's kind of off, right? Something's off, then there is some unknown, unconscious thought that may be interfering and kind of changing, right, the situation. It could be there. I'm just saying, I'm not saying it is there, but it could be there. So this is something that needs to be looked at. Now, of course, this is not, I'm not going to analyze this, but this is how it is. So manas, and then buddhi. Buddhi is used to calculate and to analyze and to inquire and to ask and to get to the bottom of matters. It is your cognitive capacity. And then we have chittam. Chittam is memory. So without memory, you can't think. All of your thinking, what is thinking? What is thinking? What happens right before thinking? Or let me ask this. On the basis of what do you think?
Another thought.
Yeah, on another thought based on your memory, right? Because you've read about something, suppose, a year ago, and now you start to think about all of those thoughts that are stored in you, in your memory, in your chittam. Therefore, if you take out memory, you can't think. And this is how I said yesterday. The 7-second memory man, right? He said, he was interviewed and he says, what's it like not to have memory? And he was crying. He was frustrated. And he says, I'm unable to think. I can't think. Because he's got no database to draw from. You need to take from a database, put it into the present, and then apply your buddhi in the light of that thought, which comes from the memory. Yeah, because, you start thinking, but, your thought is always in relation to what you saw before. That's why babies don't really think, because they have no impressions from the world yet. You only start to think based on, having seen the sun. Oh, now what is the sun? What's the nature of the sun? And I see the butterfly. Oh, I wonder how the butterfly goes, the metamorphosis, right? So yes, you do input data, but that data also needs memory to start to think. So it's not just present moment. You also kind of draw references from having seen this previously. So the subtle body, the inner instrument, the antahkarana is the inner instrument. It's a subtle body, another name for it. Manas, right? Buddhi for thinking. We have chittam for, as I said, you need memory to be utilized to think right now. All inquiry is on the basis of, right, having thought, having been exposed to that information before. And then ahankara. Ahankara is the I sense. And the name for it, so this is the place where all of your, see, to be an individual, to have a sense of individuality, you can't just have thoughts or doubts. It has to be centered onto one individual. For example, if this fella is hungry, do I start feeding Jens? Hey, here is some food. And then, oh, now I'm like, oh, I'm still hungry, right? So, you know, when your body is hungry, then it sends that hunger data to another function of the mind, of the subtle body, called the I sense, the ego. When there's a memory of some young, you know, some being a young person or some pleasant memory, then that sends information to the I sense. And so you say, I remember. Okay, so the I refers to the I sense. Okay, when there is kind of, you know, some, you know, you take charge of your emotions or you have an emotional response about something, then that also sends its data to this same place called the I sense. And finally, when you calculate or you inquire, you understand something like the nature of reality, you understand the nature of reality, then that also understanding gets passed on to the I sense. So look at this. So you have all of these data constantly being fed into the I sense. So now the question is, what's the relationship between the I sense and awareness? Because this is where the error gets made, right? And now the reason I have a pot there, I kind of like to use this plastic container. The relationship between your I sense and awareness is the relationship between this pot and the clay. So this pot is always going to change the size or the shape based on what data is being received. Suppose someone says someone hurts you, right? Or hurts me or whatever. And then the I sense now feels very small, right? Small pot, right? And then someone kind of uplifts you, says, you know, you're a wonderful person, like Nima constantly uplifts me, right? So this is wonderful. So then, you know, the I sense is kind of like uplifted. Now, is there something wrong that the I sense is uplifted or that it's deflated? Is there something wrong with this?
No.
No, because it's the function of the I sense. The I sense is always going to change shape and size according to what people say to you. If I now really kind of, you know, treat you very nicely, I hope I'm doing this already, your I sense in a very nice place. But if I start to kind of, you know, look down upon people, then your I sense is going to kind of become smaller. And why? Because, right, now you're going to have like different thoughts about me, and they're not going to be, you know, very conducive to being a pleasant person. And then memory you're going to draw from someone else having hurt you, and that reference is going to be also added onto the I sense. But no matter what the size of your I sense is, what's the content between it? What's the content obtaining through and through the entirety of your I sense? The clay. And now, what is the clay equated to here? Awareness. So if it's got a big I sense, big eyes, like inflated, not inflated in a bad sense, but in a good sense, I'm aware of that. You see this? So in this case, the clay is the awareness. But now when you have a small I sense, I'm aware of it. Now, what is this aware of it? The content. The content is through and through your entirety of your I sense. So this is why all day long, you just say things like, I am small, I am big, I am intelligent, I am tired. So all of this is just the changes of this individual called the I sense. But the fact that there is awareness of it, there's a seer in reference to the seen, right? The seen state of mind, the seen state of I sense. That's because the content of your I sense is always awareness. So the wise person understands this. Instead of kind of, oh, I am feeling down, and see what's happening here? They're giving reality to the form. So what's the relationship between your I sense and you? You, in this case, is the clay. Satya Mithya relationship. Okay, wherever there is an I sense, whether it's a good I sense or a fantastic I sense, there's always awareness of it. Why? Because the entirety of that I sense is pervaded by the content of the I sense. In this case, the clay, okay, in the absolute sense, consciousness. So do you see where the point of error is now? When we say I feel down, I don't feel really good anymore, where am I putting my focus? Onto the pot or the clay? The pot, right? So the wise person understands that despite feeling like this or like that, or down, or unworthy, or inadequate, or very intelligent, or not so intelligent, and especially when the body starts to age, then you're not receiving so much health into your I sense, right? And then it gets added and says, oh, I used to be so sharp, I could recall any verse, it was so fantastic. But the wise fella, the wise pot understands, in the presence of myself, that which obtains throughout the entirety of my I sense. The entirety of my I sense is pervaded by me awareness. And how do you show this? Because the relationship is like Satya Mithya, pot and clay. Maybe a better example is like this. Your I sense is constantly being sculpted like that. But what's constantly the truth of this I sense? Plastic, 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 plastic. I'm aware of my I sense being like this. Aware of the I sense being like that. Aware of the I sense being like that. Okay? So this is the I sense, and the world puts their I where? In the mithya, in the mithya. So you see, there's no contradiction between I sense and awareness. You understand? It's a Satya Mithya relationship. That's how you resolve it. So when people say this, you have a big ego, whatever. The word ego has two definitions. The first is conceit or pride. The second, which we refer in Vedanta, is just this functionary of the mind. It's just another function of your subtle body. That's it. So, if you want to say big ego, it's better to say conceit or pride. Otherwise, it kind of, confuses the individual. So what is your relationship to your I sense now, knowing this? It's another function of the mind. Just like my memory, just like my buddhi, just like, the intellect. Just another function of the mind. If you didn't have the I sense, it would be very unhelpful, wouldn't it? Because you wouldn't be able to have an individuality in this world. Okay. So now this I sense, it gives a seeming stability, right? I. But how do we show that this I sense doesn't have as much stability as we thought? How do we show that? Because the I sense changes. One moment I'm like this, next moment like that. So you don't have to go beyond the waking state. You can just look at your waking state. But in the dream, suppose now we say I'm a teacher, right? I'm a king. But in the dream, what am I? A beggar, a pauper, or whatever. So where's the stability of the I sense? Right? It's gone. It's totally changed. And then where's your I sense, in sleep? It's not there. And even if it is there, then, the data is not being given to it. So therefore, there's no world. But either way, the point is the relationship between your I sense and you is this Satya Mithya relationship. So verse 7, Chaya ahankara yoho aikyam tapta ayaha pindavat matam tat ahankara tadatmyat deha chetanatam agat. Yeah, so this I sense is what gives you also this sense of my. That's what the I sense does. Whatever happens to this body, to this memory, it stamps it with my. It's like a stamper. You have a memory. Whose memory is it? Mine. You have a thought about yourself. Whose thought is it? Mine. You have an understanding. Mine. We call this mamatwam. My, the maker of my. my thought, my memory, my pain, my joy. Okay. Now, knowing this, it goes into a further analysis by saying the question, what is the relationship between the I sense and awareness? I use my own example with a pot and clay, but it wants to do its own example with, before I got here, I typed on Amazon, iron ball, and I got this. Ta-da! See, I got two. So it's a very nice example. I've never used this, but I thought it was kind of unique, right? It's got the same concept. So the I sense is being equated to the iron ball. Now, if you look at the iron ball, what color is it? It's silver, it's cold, right? It has weight, it has mass. Now, suppose you have a little bit of scratches, right? Because no one's eye sense is perfect. Always some, inadequacies coming. So there's a lot of kind of, roughness to this iron ball. And sometimes in the morning it feels smaller like that. And then your spouse kisses you and you feel like that, right? And then they say something and I feel like this, right? So it's a constant kind of, change, right, that it experiences. Now, suppose this iron ball is in the proximity of fire. Now, what's the quality of fire? Suppose we say two things. It's bright and it is hot. So now, if I put this on top of the fire, what's going to happen? This iron ball will seemingly take on the brightness and the hotness of the fire. So this means that now the teacher has to come in and say, there's two things here, right? There's the iron ball and there is the fire, because they have such an intimate relationship that you can't discern it, right? Wherever there's a fire, that's exactly where the iron ball is. Wherever there's the iron ball, that's exactly where the fire is. So it seems very hard to kind of break. We think it's one person, just like with the eye sense. I think it's just one total being. So the teacher has to come and say, there's actually two things here. There is, something that is changing and it's going through its modifications and it's rough. But another thing is something that's bright. It illumines it. So when the fire comes in proximity of this iron ball becomes hot. So it seems this hotness is kind of a metaphor for sentiency, right? This I sense now seems to be sentient, right? This is why we say, oh, I'm sentient being. Why? Because the iron ball is pervaded by the fire. So the iron ball has no sentiency of its own at all. But in the proximity of the fire, it's bright. Now, what exactly is this brightness going to light up? Suppose it's a bright, all of its imperfections. And so, what does the person say? I am imperfect, I'm like this, I'm like that, I don't know. And so, what's happening here is called a mutual superimposition. So, on one hand, the nature of this iron ball is imperfection. It's constantly, right, being given data that doesn't make it so smooth. And therefore, this imperfection gets passed on to, in this case, awareness, right? So I become an imperfect individual. But then awarenesses, right, equated to the fire now. So the ego is equated to the iron ball and fire is equated to awareness. The awareness's attribute, if it were to have an attribute, is immortality. It's because it's unborn, right? So it never dies. It's limitless and it's unborn. So what happens to this limitation, this limitlessness and unborn, this immortality? It gets passed on to the iron ball. So therefore the individual says, I am immortal, right? I'm going to live forever. But why are they saying that? Because they do not understand what is this immortality referring to. Because there's such a close, right, relationship between the two, they mix the whole thing up. And that's why we want to say, I want to live forever. Let me get whatever technology to extend my life, because of this intimate connection between the I sense and the iron ball. So this is a very kind of a nice example. And, what else does the Ahamkara experience? Things like, happiness and gloominess. And so this gets passed on to whom? onto I. Therefore, I am happy. I am gloomy. To whom does gloominess and happiness belong to? To the state of your I sense. Because of what is the state of the I sense known? Because of me, because of the Drik, Satyam. Now, there's one limitation. Every Vedantic example has a limitation. What do you think is the limitation of this example? Besides the obvious fact that both the fire and the ball are Drishya. But is your awareness Drishya? No. So we have to, once we mention the example, we have to mention its limitation. Otherwise, the person starts to sort of, live from a mental, create an image in their mind. So the question is, how do you discern between I sense and consciousness? How do you discern without any error between this iron ball, your I sense, and consciousness?
I think I sense help us to understand closer to or fully consciousness.
You need the I sense to understand the reality.
Yes.
Right. So in other words, don't get rid of the I sense at all, otherwise you can't understand. So this is true. But how do I understand in this moment, right now, as we're sitting, never mind about after break, but right now, how do I, from your standpoint, how do I, when I say I from your standpoint, understand that there is a person here, and how do you discern between me and this right now?
I can
It's
see
me
the
more
essence
than that.
of what
Huh?
It's not separated. I cannot know. I can only know because there is.
Okay, closer.
I can see the eye sense.
I can see the I sense, yeah. I can see the changes of the individual. Yeah, so the I sense is going to go through changes, right? So when I asked this question, maybe there was like some tension, my I sense is now tight, I should be able to answer you. But just a moment ago, the I sense was like, oh, he's not asking any questions, I'm just going to sit and listen, I feel really comfortable. So in that sense, the I sense has already changed. But before, there was an awareness of this comfortable I sense, and then when I asked the question, it got contracted maybe, then there's still awareness of that contraction. Consciousness is that which is always true. It's invariable presence, in whose presence manifests this person, manifests this I sense, who's going through different thoughts and concerns, and sometimes they feel very nice about themselves, and sometimes not so nice about themselves. But in the presence of awareness, which is invariable presence, these conditions come and go. So it's a very simple understanding. Whatever is unchanging in your experience, that is you awareness. Okay? Whatever is changing in your experience, that is the I sense. Now, when I say changing, what do I mean? I mean adjectives that we attach onto awareness, such as I am, and then you fill in an adjective. Like I am big or small or smart. So whatever adjectives we fill in, that belongs to the I sense. But in the presence of self, of Drik, these adjectives are coming and going. But who doesn't come and go? That one who is there to accommodate all of these adjectives coming and going. Okay?
So you meant that if you look at I sense as objectivity.
Yeah, just like Diderot said, so you can objectify this person, but also look at this. What's the relationship between the I sense and you? Actually, I like this example better. What's the relationship between the I sense, the one that's changing, and you? It's a Satya-Mithya relationship. So whatever there is a person, whatever that person is, that's exactly where the reality is. And that reality is known how? As self-evident I. So is there a question of separating the I sense from awareness? Do you need to separate them? You can't separate them, because as long as there's a person alive, there's no question of separating the awareness from the I sense. It's a cognitive understanding. Wherever there's a person, there is the self-awareful I. And this is true for everyone. So you need not kind of, separate or kill or reduce your I sense. If there is a feeling of smallness, is there awareness of that smallness? Yes. Therefore, I am there. If there is a feeling of greatness or intelligence, is there awareness of that intelligence? Therefore, I am there.
So in the case, this has just gone in my head now, in the case of somebody having a major accident and they're in a coma, the I am is there, but the I sense is dormant, for one
Correct,
better
yeah.
word.
That's correct. That is because in a coma, you need to accommodate the subtle body by the brain. So if the brain is damaged, then the subtle body cannot kind of enter the brain, and therefore it's kind of like in deep sleep. Yeah, and that's why you have to wait for the brain to restore, for the subtle body to re-enter. Yeah. How do you discern between the I sense and you, awareness?
I sense keeps on changing. The change is constant for I sense.
Ah,
For awareness, it's constant, it's not changing.
okay, lovely, good answer. Anyone else wants to add? How do you discern without any errors between I sense and awareness?
It's Satya and Nitya relationship.
It's a Satya Mithya relationship. Wherever there is a person, wherever there is a feeling or sensation about who I am, wherever there's an opinion about who I am, that's exactly where awareness, that's exactly where the content is. So the I sense is nothing but an opinion about I. But because there's always awareness of the opinion about I, that means I'm not gone. I'm always there, obtaining in the I sense, giving it light, just like this ball, illumining its perfections and imperfections all day long. Therefore, it becomes a cognitive discernment rather than this elimination that they have nowadays. You know, get rid of your ego. Who started the statement, by the way? Get rid of your ego. I hear it so much.
Question I was going to ask, how do you get rid of ego? Because that's your I sense, and the I sense is always there.
Yeah, as long as there's a body that's alive, you can't get rid of your ego. Yeah, it's just an understanding of the Satya Mithya relationship.
That's cognitive.
It's a cognitive understanding. It's not a feeling, because a feeling obviously is. See, look at this. If I say 1 + 1 = 2, is that a fact? Yeah. But how So Kyung feels about that is going to be very different from how I feel about that. So both of us understand the same fact. We're both keeping in reality, but because we have a different personality, she may be more emotional, so she's going to be 1 + 1 = 2. And Andre's going to be 1 + 2. Okay, let's move on, right? Right. So it's a personality thing. So the sensation or the feeling, whether you're in your heart or whatever you want, whatever they say nowadays, that's a personal thing. That's why we don't confuse in Advaita Vedanta by saying it's an experience or it's this or it's that. It's just a cognitive understanding, Satya Mithya relationship. However I am, that's exactly where awareness is. However I am, that's exactly awareness is. So if it's a feeling, keep that to yourself, right? Otherwise we confuse other people. Suppose a teacher right now says, to kind of like be teaching and to, have this clarity, right? And I'm just like this, right? Would that confuse you, right? You would probably start to project, wow, this fella is in some kind of a state. So so we have to be careful not to impart these wrong notions, and because it reduces your I sense, and we start to compare ourselves to Buddhas and Ramana Maharishis and all of these other people. It's not fair.
Need the I sense to get access to awareness.
Perfect. Perfect, yeah. So in other words, through the I sense, I discover I am the invariable presence, in whose presence the changing I sense comes and goes. And the point is, the awareness is still there. So the awareness has not gone anywhere at all.
Still there, but you open the door a little bit, or you can open the door more.
Yeah, and of course, this is refining the mind, right? Now, this is a good thing. What is our relationship then to the I sense? Leave it alone, right? Through it, we discover who we are. Meanwhile, nurture it. Nurture it with, I'm not going to say, oh, leave the I sense, you're just making a big ego. We don't say this. Nurture it. Feed it with positive knowledge, with positive thoughts, in the presence of, company of good people, of wise people. Nurture it. And in nurturing, it just becomes easier and easier and easier to understand this relationship between Satya and Mithya. It's just nurtured.
That's the reason why you have satsang, to maintain equanimity and harmony.
That's why we have
Otherwise,
satsangs.
you
Yeah.
are always going to be affected by the world and going to
Yeah.
media all the time.
Yeah. That's why we have satsangs, just to remind us of this knowledge, because it's kind of hard, to keep this in a very busy world. I mean, I don't know what's it for others.
You leave this class, you're back into that world.
Yeah.
And it all comes back.
Yeah, and so it's kind of like ironic. The eye sense is the awareness is always there, but when the eye sense is so much data is coming into the eye sense, like the whole teaching that we're expounding right now, it just goes out the window, right? So this means we just need to be reminded for a time being until it becomes from impulsive to mechanical to deliberate to what you want to be spontaneous. Spontaneous so much so that you could be in a accident, right? Or whatever situation in life, having an argument, but the satya mithya between the person that's arguing and me doesn't leave.
So you're forming new habits or a new personality, and you're just sculpting that personality by self-reflecting.
Exactly, on and on and on.
Can you repeat this, please? What he said?
You are sculpting your eye sense, through a continued exposure to the knowledge. You're sculpting it in such a way that it kind of gains, a shape that is keeping with the knowledge. So you want your eye sense sculpted. How? Not according to this la-la land of pseudo-spirituality, but according to the models of Vedanta. Therefore, your beingness, right, your eye sense is always keeping with the knowledge. And the knowledge is keeping with the world, with the reality. Why does the eye sense keep on going back to its old orientations? That's the question that's kind of being asked. The reason is because of memory, number one. Memory imprints are so strong, and your life doesn't kind of let you enough opportunity to have an environment that is, sustainable for growth, conducive for growth. That's why environment is key. Exposing oneself to a house, maybe with some, pictures, something that just reminds you of divinity, reminds you of the presence of God, right? Because as we said, you want your eye sense sculpted in such a way that it's normal. By the time you leave that door and you're in the shopping mall, it's still there. Now, why is a shopping mall so much harder to have this understanding than is it inside the class? I thought about this just before coming here. Did you notice that? The moment you go to a shopping mall, it's kind of like a different vibe altogether. The reason is because, you have to look at what's the intention behind the shopping mall? It's commercial. Right? It's a commercial intention. So the intention wasn't to inspire or instill divinity. It is to kind of just walk and psychologically build so you can buy as many products as you want. So it pulls your eye sense according to the intention through which it was built. And therefore, it kind of has this less propensity to induce this knowledge in that moment. But if you find yourself in a forest, instant, easy. A lake and a forest, that's why we have vanaprastha. Why not ocean, right? Actually, why not ocean? That's a new question I'm asking now. Maybe it's loud, right? Thunderous. Drrr. Maybe we want a little bit calmer environment in the trees because the trees are so close to the God's world. But the moment you go into a shopping mall, it's a man-made world. So it's one step farther away from God's world, from the empirical world. Therefore, it doesn't kind of instill reverence. But it's good practice. I tell you, in Australia, I go to the shopping mall and I just sit there and I bring this knowledge. Let me sit down and, and let me just bring in this knowledge, and how clear is it? Lovely practice. I don't have to stay in meditation in the room where it's all perfect. No, expose me to an uncomfortable environment. That's where the real growth happens. How am I going to feel after having violated the rules of the game? That alone is what makes you follow the rules of the game. So it's not you should follow. No, I don't care whether I should or shouldn't. I want to feel good. I want my eye sense to be uplifted. So just like you said, you need satsangs reminders to, to keep on uplifting. And there's nothing wrong with it. In pseudo-spirituality, we say, no, that's just your eye sense, your awareness. I just explained there's no contradiction between the eye sense and awareness, right? So it doesn't mean just because my nature is awareness, I don't really care what my eye sense is. This is cuckoo thinking, right? So nurturing it. Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.